Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ben, and this is the Smoking Hot Confessions Barbecue Podcast. Hey family, I hope you're well wherever you are and you got that thin blue smoke rolling. Today we're kicking off 2020, Season 7. Can you believe that? We're up to Season 7. We've been going, this will be the 4th year now the podcast's been running. That is pretty wild. And tonight is going to be pretty interesting because Santa was very generous to me at Christmas time and he gave me a Rodecaster Pro podcasting desk, which means I get to play all the music, all the jingles, do all that stuff live. And it should save me a bunch of time in post. But this is the first time I'm trying to use it live, so just bear with me if it does go off the rails, but I will do my best to make sure it doesn't go too far. So kicking things off for 2020, I thought no one would be better to talk to than the captain of the 2019 ABA winning team, Butcher's Axe. So we're going to get to him shortly, but it won't be too long at all because I'm going to run to the next jingle right now.
This is the internationally awarded Smoking Hot Confessions Barbecue Podcast with your host, Ben Arnott. How long's it been since your last confession?
Michael, mate, how are you?
Ben, awesome, mate. Awesome. How are you?
Mate, I'm very good. How was that little intro there? Was that not too rough?
I know. It was pretty good. It was good. I love being live. It was like I'm part of it.
Mate, you are live. It's fantastic. So, mate, how has the silly season been for you?
Mate, I've put on a few kilos. I ate a lot of barbecue. I ate a lot of non-barbecue foods as well. But, yeah, it's been a lot of good fun. So caught up with the boys a few times and, yeah, really got a lot out of it.
Beautiful. And did Santa bring you any nice new shiny barbecue toys?
I think over the last however many years we've been doing this, Santa's exhausted all the toys that I need. So I actually got given a few other non-barbecue related toys. I got a pasta maker attachment. So I started making some fresh pasta sheets and trying my hand at those sorts of things. Oh, but I got a grinder attachment as well to make sausages. So
there you go.
I haven't tried that one yet. Yeah, haven't tried that yet, but I will.
Mate, I'm actually, first of all, I'm really glad to hear that you did get that. My dad bought me for Christmas last year, he bought me a grinder and I love it. But just today I've actually had to pack up about a garbage bag and a half of minced brisket offcuts out of the freezer. The freezer in my laundry died. And, we didn't work it out until we started smelling this funny smell. And we went in there and, of course, water all over the floor, a few chunks of ice, meat was just gone off. And so, 2 full garbage bags of meat I just had to throw out just about an hour ago. Heartbroken.
That would be absolutely heartbreaking. Hopefully it was all just offcuts and nothing, no competition-style brisket sitting in there pre-trimmed and waiting for the next comp.
Not brisket, but there were some chicken thighs.
Oh, that's not too bad, but the prep on those can be pretty painful.
Yeah, the cost is low, but the time investment's high.
Yeah, don't like chicken.
Yeah. So, mate, you have got to be absolutely riding high right now. You've cleaned up 2019. How does that feel?
It was super surreal throughout the season. And leading into the end of the year, there was a bit of anxiety around would we actually finish first. There was teams creeping up behind us and a few big competitions looming. But the day that we worked out it was mathematically impossible for anyone to jump us it was pure elation. We haven't really come down from it. We've just been so excited ever since. Absolutely.
So I guess my question then is sort of what went into securing the championship?
So probably in December of the year before, so 2018 or January 2019, Sash, Sam and I, the main team members met up and thought, what are we going to do differently this year to ensure we can do a bit better? So always looking to improve. And a few things we identified was we wanted to be more organised than we ever had been. We wanted to make sure we had the right team members and the right resources in terms of people who could come and come to various comps, because we're finding it's a little bit hard with only 2 people, sometimes 3. And then also we decided to focus a lot on investing time in our families when we weren't doing barbecue. So it meant when we were going off to do barbecue, we felt as though it was more of a privilege and something that we could actually really, really enjoy. And our families didn't mind us doing it so much either. So it really worked as for everyone involved.
Yeah, I think the first time I caught up with you in 2019 was early on. I think it was February down in Hobart, and I could tell back then that you guys had flipped a switch. There was a definite sort of just sort of change in general sort of attitude and approach to the competitions. I could feel that you decided this was your year. Yeah,
I remember that. It was good weather that weekend, and the day we spoke, we were a little bit dusty on hand turn-in day. We had a big one the night before, but we really what we decided was being prepared wasn't just having your meat prepped before a comp, or it wasn't just having your times done, but it was also having all your sauces pre-mixed, all your rubs pre-mixed, all your brines pre-mixed, having everything already ready. So when you get there, all you have to focus on is following the plan and cooking it right, and then making sure you make as little mistakes as possible.
It kind of sounds like you're talking about a mindset shift almost.
It really was. We were really kind of fed up with making mistakes ourselves. One of those things was due to a lack of sleep we identified. So it was we'd sort of stay up all night together, have a few drinks and enjoy the atmosphere, all go to bed at the same time, and then all wake up at the same time. And what that meant was we weren't actually getting the most sleep that we could. So the first big change we made was we actually started sleeping in shifts. So old Sammy loves a bit of a day drink. I'm more of a nighttime guy myself. So he doesn't mind on a Saturday having a few beers during the day and then hitting the hay early, whereas I sort of like to be up a bit later usually. So we sort of get the same amount of sleep in the end, but that was really the big change for us was getting a huge amount of sleep.
Sounds like Sammy and Al from the Flamin' Mongrels might get along well.
Oh, they do. They do. Yeah, they do. And Bretto and I get along well too, so it's a dangerous combination.
That's awesome. So, okay, so that was Hobart, and you'd had your mindset change, and you'd made a couple of other changes there that you were mentioning. Where did you go from there? Because I don't want to say you were I don't want to say that you were expecting it when I called your name for Grand Champions, but you also didn't seem surprised, like you knew that you'd sort of set everything in place. So where did you go from there from that weekend?
I think what it was we had in that comp there, we received, I think it was 3 first places and a second or something along those lines.
Oh yeah, you killed it. You absolutely killed it.
And so when we heard RGC get called, and it wasn't us, and we hadn't been called before that, we sort of knew that we had it there.
Oh, okay.
And at least we didn't hear our name for chicken, which is daunting. You think, how bad can I bomb this? But then from there, we actually had 3 comps. So we had a comp the week before that, a local comp, a KCBS comp, which we GC'd. Then we went to Hobart. And then the next week we had the Masters of Q Invitational competition in Melbourne, which was an interesting concept where it was basically an even playing field with, I think it was 16 in the end. The best teams from around the country got together, even meat, even amount of money to spend on the same sauces and rubs. But to be fair, coming off the back of 2 GCs and knowing we had our timing, we wanted to prep. So we prepped pretty hard for that one too. We couldn't prep the meat, so we prepped our schedule. We prepped our plan on what rubs and sauces we wanted and how we're going to spend the money. Our sleep, what equipment we're going to use, what little advantages we could use with what was in the pantry and what different woods we could use. And so really the prep going into that was interesting. But we certainly didn't think we were going to win that one. We with the caliber of teams that was there, and again didn't hear our name for the first few, I don't think. I think we were just outside of the top 5. And then we came in with I think it was like 3 call-ups, and then the GC of that too. And that was unbelievable at that stage. 3 in a row was something we didn't dream of winning one GC ever, but 3 in a row was crazy.
Yeah, I think that might have been an Australian first too, 3 in a row.
It could have been. I think in the past maybe it would equal. It was across 2 sanctioning bodies, so whether people want to debate that or not, but it was 3 sanctioned GCs in a row at that stage. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Now, I just wanted to just circle back to that. What was the name of that competition from Q Club?
Masters of Q.
Masters of Q, that was it, yeah. I keep confusing that with Q in the club, which is just an SCA comp, isn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So Masters of Q, that was a really interesting concept. Now, you mentioned that it was an equal playing field. For people who aren't familiar with that competition, can you give us a bit of a rundown on how Andrew set that up all for you?
Yeah, so effectively there were, I think it was 16 teams in the end, and then what they did was they gave you a bit of an allowance, sort of controlling how much money you had. And what your allowance went towards was the box of meat you were going to buy, and all the boxes were different. They had different cuts in there. They had different, so they all had a brisket, but then in terms of the pork, some may have had collars, some may have had a shoulder. You know, in terms of lamb, some may have had cutlets, some may have had shoulders, some may have had ribs, whatever it may have been. And then they let you inspect. So it's kind of like a Japanese fish market, I think someone said, where you're sort of in there and you're throwing the styrofoam lids everywhere. I was actually at a house auction on the same weekend for myself, so I missed out on the auction. But Sam and Sash had their little notepad, and we were all prepped. We knew what we wanted to do, so they went in there. And our goal was to get 4 out of the 5 cuts we wanted, which we did, and try and spend no more than whatever we thought was a reasonable amount. And then the balance of what you were left over after you bought your box, so you were bidding against people.
Mm-hmm.
Some people went really hard on spend a lot on the meat, but then after that, the rest was left to spend on sauces and rubs. And then there was a pantry as well with things like sugar and honey and vinegar and all those sorts of things. I don't think that there may have been stock. Anyway, whatever it was. And then what you did was you all had the same choice of meat. You were restricted to what sauces and rubs you could use and injections, and the quantity too, based on how much money you had left over. And then it was just go for your life and cook it and hand it in.
So was that real money that you had to bring with you? And I'm assuming everybody had the same cap, or was it like Cav Cash? Andrew Kavanagh just sort of gave you a bunch of Monopoly money when you walked in the door.
It was Cav Cash.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. I think from memory, maybe entry was a little bit more than a normal comp, but that would be expected with being provided the meat and the sauces and rubs. And then we've actually still got our Cav Cash. We found it the other day in the bottom of a comp box when prepping for next year or for this year.
Oh, you shouldn't have said that, mate. You could have snuck it in your pocket for Masters of Q this year.
Mate, we hope we're invited, that's all. We just hope we get an invite.
But honestly, I would be shocked if the 2019 champions didn't get an invite.
Likewise, mate. I think a few people would be too.
So what was next then after Masters of Q?
So Masters of Q was crazy. And then we had I think it was a couple, maybe could have been a few weeks break, maybe 3 weeks. And then we went straight into Meat Stock Melbourne, which was our first competition 3 years before that. That's when you and I met in person.
Yep, that's one of my favourite comps, that one.
Yeah, likewise. I really enjoyed that one back then, and then have been ever since. And then we went and did that. We opted, which we have been doing lately, is not to do the SCR on the Saturday and sort of use that as a day of recreation and sort of enjoying each other's company and just relaxing. We had our families there, and it was a lot of fun. And then Saturday night rolled around, and when we should have been prepping, the party continued. And before you knew it, it was early hours of the morning, and we still hadn't injected any of our meat, put anything in the brine, followed the plan. So it was an interesting one, that one, actually. So got around to it, finally got everything done. Mick from Full Throttle Barbecue tried to handicap us by offering us a few drinks from when they won Brisket Kings at Port Macquarie the year before.
Oh, that giant chest full of whiskey.
Yeah. So Mick did his best, and then the next day, although we were a little bit behind on schedule, the cook actually it went quite well. We were a little bit disappointed in a few things, but the cook went fairly according to plan. And we were exhausted, emotionally exhausted and physically exhausted at the end of after the turn-ins, and sort of a bit deflated because we, made a few mistakes. But then when results happened and we got our first meat stock trophy. We'd never got one before that, just even for a call-up. We got 3 and then announced GC, which was 3 for 3 in the ABA and 4 in a row for that year, and got a standing ovation from the crowd. That was probably the highlight of the year for us.
Oh, it'd have to be. Winning meat stock's got to be sort of the jewel in the crown, I reckon. Now, although like the Invitational would be up there as well, I suppose, but I mean, really, like in terms of scale and grandiosity, getting up on that stage in front of that huge crowd at meat stock, like it's got to be wild.
You know what, Jay does an amazing job at running those events, putting on a spectacle, getting the crowd. Well, I was lucky enough to go up to Meat Stock Sydney later that year to see it, and that was again insane. But to be there, to win it, it's coveted. It's something everyone wants, is a Meat Stock GC, and just to get it. Yeah, it was surreal. It was a highlight. Sam and I, we'd been working on that since effectively day one. That wasn't our goal. We never set out to really win. We just wanted to do better. But we wanted one trophy at Meat Stock, and when we got one, they happened to get a fair few in a row, the GC as well, which was amazing.
Yeah, I still remember meeting you face to face. We had spoke on the phone before that, Meat Stock 2017. And back then, as you said, that was your first competition, but you guys still got call-outs at your very first ever competition, which was a huge meat stock.
Yeah, it was, you know what? It was, I remember, this haunts me, right? Back then, speaking to you on the phone, because we did the interview before, during and after. And on the phone before, I can't remember what I called Sam, whether I called him the Brisket King or the Brisket Whisperer or something like that. I said, I kind of...
I think it was the best brisket cook in Australia.
See, you got a good memory. It was the best brisket cook in Australia. And back then it was tongue in cheek, but he took that so seriously since then. And we got a 4th place call out at our first competition for brisket, and then went and backed it up in Adelaide a few months later and got our first trophy ever, which was 2nd place brisket at Up and Smoke in Adelaide. So your interview sparked him to actually want to live up to the name. Look, whether he's lived up to the name or not, I mean, we've got a few trophies for brisket, but it certainly lit a fire up him, that's for sure.
Well, I'm glad I could help in some way.
No, mate, it's all you. It's been from the start.
I wouldn't say it's all me. Definitely not. But I do appreciate it. So Meat Stock Melbourne, where'd you go after that?
Oh, I'm just trying to think now. So Meat Stock Melbourne, we then had a little bit of a break. The year before, we'd won a round in the heat in the Pitmaster Series here in Melbourne. So they had a series of comps where 6 teams went up against each other. The winner of each comp then met in the final, with a few wildcard entries in the final. So we'd won that series back in November the year before. So we got into the final, which was in June. We came runner-up in that to our mates Ross and Boomer and their lovely partners as Just Sneens was their team name. And that was a lot of fun. It was a really good vibe, good event. And then our next sanctioned comp after that was Meat, where again you and I bumped into each other in Horsham.
Oh right, so that was quite a bit of a break then. I think Meat was August.
Yeah, so I think it was 4 months. So I think we ran a class in between, and we used that class as a bit of a practice cook. And so the class was, it was either, I think it was 2 weeks before meet. So we dusted all the cobwebs off. I think we had about 40 people at the class, and we sort of just showed them all our comp techniques and flavor profiles and all that sort of thing. But really, it was just a good practice for us leading into meet.
Yeah, and you got that huge fire pit trophy too.
Yeah, that was crazy. Meet was the most physically demanding, emotionally exhausting comp we had done for the year. We cooked our heart out. We really wanted that one because it was a huge comp, and it would have gone a long way to us cementing our position. And yeah, we GC'd, which again, you know, we got 2 perfect scores in the one competition, which for us was, again, we didn't expect to ever win a comp, let alone get more than one trophy, but to then get 2 perfect scores and get a GC in the same comp was unbelievable.
That is pretty incredible. Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah, that was surreal. That was really surreal for us. And sort of one of our teammates who was there during the day, Justin, one of the original teammates, he actually had to leave early. And I remember he left straight after the cook, and none of us were very overly pleased with how we went. And I called him afterwards, and I said, "Hey, mate, we've actually won. We actually won the comp." And he honestly, until I got home and until I sent him the photos of the trophies on the trailer, he honestly didn't believe us. So that's how surreal it was.
So where does that huge fire pit live now?
Sits at Sash's warehouse where he runs his business out of. So that's currently sitting in the back corner. We've been waiting for all these total fire bans here in Melbourne to go down and for it to get a bit colder before we can use it. But yeah, we're looking forward to getting that huge trophy out and using it.
So good, mate. Make sure you send me some pictures.
Definitely. Well, you could invite you down. You come for the party.
Oh, hey, there you go. So I then saw the Axe at Fat Drip in October. Had you competed between August and October?
I went to the American Royal with a few mates as the All-Stars.
Oh, yeah, that little trip.
Yeah, that little one. And then I left my wife at home, who was about 5 months pregnant at the time. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to do the right thing and I'm going to spend some time with family. And Sam, Wilfred and Ringin Mick actually decided to go to Fat Drip and try their hand at that.
And they cleaned house again.
Again, yeah. So we prepped as we usually did. We pre-mixed all our sauces and rubs before the guys went. Actually, Sam, this one is hats off to Sam. He did almost everything himself for this one. He really he loves going across the border to Adelaide. We've got a lot of good friends over there. And he did everything and they pulled it off. It was, watching it from home was the first comp for Butcher's Axe I'd ever missed. And it was excruciating watching the results. It was, again, another surreal moment, being back in Melbourne, watching the live stream, it dropping out, can't hear the sound, certain things happening, and then all of a sudden you hear them that they've won and making it 6 in a row. That was, that was icing on the cake.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, you may have been nervous watching that at home, but I was watching Sam's face during those presentations, and I think he was more nervous than you were.
What did he say to me before? He says, look, I just want to get one trophy for lamb, just to say, that we'd, done well with lamb using Hunter, and we could say that. And they got a first place in lamb, and he messaged me instantly afterwards. He goes, "Oh, we're done here. I've done what I needed to do, or I've achieved what we wanted." But I could tell the way he wrote it, he was very nervous. He was still nervous for the other results, and I wish I was there just to see the look on his face, because he deserved that one. He worked really, really hard and got it. Testament to the other boys too, Wilfred and Mick, who put in the hard yards too for that one.
Oh, I could tell that Sam had worked them pretty hard. They all looked pretty tired and dirty by the end of it.
Yeah, we're used to having a few more members than 3. And we've got a lot of processes to follow, so it's a lot to do. But you know what? They did it, and they did enough to get that sixth one.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. And so from there, it would have been on to the Invitational?
It was on to Invitational. So we had a few months off between that. And then some of us drove, some of us flew up to Hawkesbury up past Sydney. And we had 4 of us, and our mate Scott from Bison Barbecue, ex-Big Smoke Barbecue, came and gave us a hand too. So that was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun at the Invitational. We were in a place that was dubbed Mid-Pack Alley, so all the mid-packers were there.
That's the most fun.
It was the most fun. We had a few of our Victorian friends there, all our other mates there, really good mates, Wizards of Q, Trev from Aussie Pit Boys. We had BBQ. Who else did we have? We had Full Throttle, Liquor Smoke, and Forest Lump. And
none of that sounds like Mid-Packer Alley.
do you know what? It's Mid-Packer. Maybe Mid-Packers the year before.
Yeah, maybe the year before. There's some big names you've just dropped there.
Yeah, it's when you turn an insult into a way of life, it's pretty gratifying.
Oh, so Mid-Packer is more a mindset than an actual like a history of performance.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, that's what I'd say. And we had the Invitational was a hell of a lot of fun. We got 2 trophies. We got a 5th place in brisket and 2nd place pork ribs. Pork ribs being one of our most consistent categories of all time. So we were stoked with that. Came 6th overall. I think we were like 11 points off GC, something crazy like that. But the top 5 were 1 point off each other or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was 6 points off 5th, and then they were for 1 point off each other or something unbelievable like that. So that was a lot of fun, that competition. And sure, it would have been great to win, but Gorillas in the Mist, they did it there, and then they backed it up the week later.
At Kangas.
At Kangas, and you were there as well. But yeah, they deserve it. They deserve all the praise they can get. I met Wookie for the first time that weekend, and he's an absolute gentleman. So couldn't be happier for him.
Yeah, fantastic. So I guess that was your last competition for the season then?
That was our last comp. Yeah, that was our last comp for the year. So
at what point did you know that you had it wrapped up?
We knew we had it wrapped up when we turned up to the Invitational, and there was X amount of teams there, or no more than X amount of teams there. So someone had done the maths, and there were less teams there than there could have been for anyone to win any more comps, or to actually get us on the amount of teams they'd beaten to get 3 GCs. So I think by the end of it, there were 4 teams. 4 or 5 teams in the end that had 3 GCs for the year or more.
Yep.
And then after that, the next tier down is how many teams you've beaten to win those 3 GCs.
Yeah.
And then when we rocked up, there were less teams there than was required for the next best team or any other team that was a threat to actually beat us overall. So, look, maybe we enjoyed the Invitational a little bit too much and didn't focus as much on the cook as we could have, but we wouldn't have changed it for the world. We had an absolute blast on Mid-Packer Alley. So
yeah, now see, I thought you had actually wrapped it up earlier in the year than that, so that must have been quite nerve-wracking heading into that competition. And as you said, you didn't know till right before the competition when it was confirmed how many teams were there. That's got to have sort of played on the mind a bit.
It does, because it would have been nice to know before we went, so that we could have maybe, maybe taken it a little bit easier on the lead-in and the prep. But we prepped fully like we would any other comp. And look, not saying that we wouldn't have taken it seriously, but maybe we would have been a little bit more relaxed leading into it. But getting there and seeing that, there was X amount of teams and we'd already had it, that was enough for us to sort of let our hair down and enjoy that beautiful weekend. The Black Bear boys put on a great event, and catching up with all our old mates.
You're listening to the internationally awarded Smoking Hot Confessions podcast with massive barbecue nerd Ben Arnott.
Now, Michael, one thing that I did want to circle back to was you had mentioned earlier the Hunter rub. Mate, tell us about that, because that's been big for you this year.
Yeah, so leading back to that first comp that we met you at Meatstock Melbourne 2017, I think it was, we used to make all our own rubs back then. No pre-bought rubs. We made a lot of our own sauces from scratch. And one of the ones that we made and continued to make was our lamb rub. And, it was one that we'd sort of tweaked over time. We tried other combinations of store-bought rubs at times and always kept coming back to our own lamb rub. And then it just started to perform well on the circuit, and a lot of people started becoming curious about it, and we started posting about it, and before you knew it, we had people asking about it. Given barbecue's a hobby, it's a little bit hard to get a rub off the ground. So our good mate Scott said he was running a business that, would help people get their rubs out and released and distributed and, manufactured. So we jumped on Scott on his offer at Stag & Co. And, yeah, it sort of blew up. It took us a while to get the recipe down pat, because going from small batch to big batch and different supplies of rubs of ingredients is quite hard. But once we got there, it started flying. Then we had to come up with a name. We did that. We got the label, and then it basically sold a lot quicker than what we thought it ever would. So we were kind of left high and dry when we sold out of our rub just before Christmas, like November, a few months after we'd made it, the first batch, and sort of had nothing to sell to people. It was a bit of it was great, but it was also stressful to try and get the next batch out again.
I was going to say, as far as problems go, there's a lot worse problems to have.
Look, it was just another part of our year that, we were now looking back on and saying, that was absolutely crazy. And at the time, it was a bit stressful, but we were stoked. The reception's been really good.
Yeah, mate. You sent me a bottle of it just a few weeks ago, and I tried it on some little lamb chops there the other day. I'm yet to try it low and slow on like a shoulder or something, but man, it was great on those lamb chops. Yeah,
we've been eating it at home with the family. Using it at comp. We even cooked a first place duck at Creekside a couple of years ago using it because it's got those herby sort of earthy tones to it, so it works well on game meat too. And I mean, people seem to love it, so we're stoked with the reception it's gotten, and testament to that, we've now up to our second batch, and hopefully it just keeps rolling out the door. Yeah, absolutely. So can I ask, how big was the first batch? Like, are we talking 5,000 bottles you sold in 2 months? So like, what sort of records did you break there? So how many, I don't know exactly, but it it was in the hundreds of kilos of rub.
Wow, nice.
And the shakers are 165 grams, so I'd have to go back and do that. But say 300 odd kilos at 165 grams, and do the math there. It sold out within about 3 months.
Tons. We'll just say it was tons.
I'll tell you,
it was heaps.
It was 1,000. It was 1,000 kilos. We'll just say that.
Okay. Yeah, there we go. That's so good, man. So good. So that was obviously kind of came off the back of your success. Was you'd sort of raised your profile enough to a point where you could sell a rub. What other opportunities has conquering the 2019 season offered you?
Oh, it's been amazing. So it's the opportunities to do classes here and interstate. They've just been coming thick and fast. The opportunities to compete with other teams who we're friends with, or new teams who want to learn from us. The opportunities to work with our sponsors on bigger projects that promote barbecue in Australia, but also releasing new rubs into the future. It's something that's been requested of us, and so there's a lot in it. Yeah.
New rubs, interesting. Can you give me any exclusives there?
To be fair, we're pretty excited about these.
Wait. Let me guess. Sam is going to make the best brisket rub ever.
You said it, not me. So, Sam, when you hear this,
Sam, you've got 10 days.
You've got 10 days. You've got 10 days. Start the clock now. So one of them will be a beef rub, a brisket rub.
I was right.
You are right. It's a beef rub. It's based off what we use at competition. And we've been tweaking it to get as close as possible as what we're used to using and testing on a few different cuts at home. So we're really excited about that one. And the other one is still in the works. So that one it'll be close. It'll be just behind the beef rub, but it'll be more of an all-purpose rub. And then potentially sometime in the future, we're thinking about maybe jarring up and bottling our finishing dust, which is something we've attributed a lot of our success to.
Yeah, I've only just recently heard about finishing dusts. Smoking Hot Bros brought one out about 12 months ago, and it's fascinating. I know I didn't realise just how many people were doing it, but yeah, it's a cool idea.
Well, yeah, Chris Davey, who was one of our first brisket mentors back in the day, he was barbecuing comp barbecuing well before we had even started from Smoking Hot Bros. They did release that the Vinegar X rub, and that was actually it's one of the things that we started playing with before we came up with our final finishing dust, but it was the thing that gave us the idea to get started. So testament to him and his experience. Finishing dusts are something that you can use at home and also at comp, and we do, so love it.
Yeah, I even put it on a steak, not even on a low and slow cut. I grabbed some of the bull dust, his black beef rub, and I just threw that on some ribeyes and then reverse seared them, and when it was done, threw a little bit of finishing dust over it. Beautiful.
Just that pop of flavour. Yeah, so that bull dust, I tried the prototype of that at Port Macquarie in 2018, and that blew my mind. That's a great rub. It's up there with some of Australia's best rubs.
Absolutely, yeah. So Hunter rub, you've got a beef rub coming out, an all-purpose rub. Man, that's so cool. So what else you got planned for? Well, not what else. We haven't talked about it yet. What have you got planned for 2020?
Well, I said before, back in September last year, my wife was 5 months pregnant, but we're ready to have our first kid any week now. So
first kid?
Yeah.
So congratulations. It's all about to change.
Yes, I've heard this. One of our newer teammates, Wilfred, was cooking some chicken today. He's got a 6-month-old. And he said that cooking barbecue and looking after a 6-month-old at the same time is one of the most challenging things he's ever done. So I look forward to that challenge, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah, I've burnt several chickens to a crisp because I would have been cooking something and then the kid's done something and I've gone to go take care of him, and then that gets led to another distraction, to another mess to clean up. And before you know it, you can just smell burning and you run outside and your chicken's just in the bin.
Especially if you're cooking hot and fast, like that's there's no margin for error when it comes to that. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of digital probes outside in the smokers and a lot of baby monitors inside for me, and I'll be sort of running between the two and trying to do what I can. So for me, early next year is going to be I'm going to miss out on the first comp. There's going to be one down here in Victoria and Geelong called Hazy Days, where the same 3 lads who did Fat Drip without me are going to try their hand at that against what seems to be like a decent comp, 40-odd teams, I think it is. So, which is actually we'll be doing Hazy Days.
Very cool.
Then from there we go on to Meat Stock Melbourne. So it's not too dense at the start of the year compared to what it was last year.
Yeah, you'd sort of knocked over half a dozen by Meat Stock last year.
Yeah, so apart from being really prepared last year, which again we've done this year, we've already prepared all of our equipment for the whole year, all of our pre-mixed a lot of sauces and rubs, and got our things in order when it comes to equipment and our smokers. So it's nice and easy to prep and pack for a comp. But the other thing was that we smashed out a few in a row and got some momentum early last year. So this year we're not going to have that luxury. So we might, for the first time in a long time, maybe do a practice cook in between a few of these comps to just make sure that we're on form.
Yeah, you don't want to lose too much of that in the off season, so to speak.
Yeah, no, the momentum for us last year was a huge thing. We burst out the gate before most teams at a local comp, and that sort of, we got a little bit lucky there. We think our friends at a team called Game of Bones here in Melbourne nearly pinned us. They were RGC and they nearly pinned us. I think they were like maybe 2 points behind us, and that was it was great to win, but to not have your best cook means that your next cook you're going to try harder, and your next cook you're going to try harder, and so hopefully early this year we can keep that momentum going. Yeah.
So does this mean that Willie and Mick are now like full-time, what do you call them, Axe members, Axe guys,
yeah.
Axe dudes?
We've got a few nicknames.
Axe holes?
Axe holes. Some of us are axe holes, apparently, if you ask certain people. But the smoking joint guys like to call us babushkas because back in the day we used to descend in height order from Sam all the way down to our smallest team member. So anyway, we've got a lot of nicknames. So Wilfred, or Big Willie as we like to call him, he's really stepped up. His first year was last year. He did almost every single comp last year. Really decided to own his part of the process. So we don't like to split proteins. We like to split processes and responsibilities. But not only did he take up his role pretty strong, but he also decided he wanted to take carriage of our rib category, which is something that we really fine-tuned our own method over time. It was a fairly straightforward method to follow. And then he came and he refined it. He actually improved it slightly to the point where it was definitely our most consistent category of 2019. So Willie's really done that. And he's stepped up into what my role ordinarily is, which is, apart from all the stuff beforehand, boxing up and choosing, the most tender cuts and the right slices and making sure that everything's seasoned perfectly. So that's going to be his role at the next comp and potentially even going forward. So that's exciting. And then we were fortunate enough that Mick said yes to come help at Fat Trip last year. And then somehow, because he has his own team or had his own team, West Side Smokers, somehow we've convinced him to jump ship and join with us. We, did anything we could and we got him across, and he's honestly a huge asset to our team. He's a great guy and really gets along with us all really well. So we're super excited to have him on the team.
That's so cool, man. That's so cool. So what sort of process do you go through when you are looking to add members to a team?
Earlier I said to you that early the year before we had Sash, Sam and I had a conversation about what we needed. Even earlier than that, we actually ran a bit of a come and compete with Butcher's Axe type. I guess it was like a class where we said,
I was going to say audition, but okay.
And that's exactly what it was. we basically said, it's a private class and we charge people money to come along, but quite literally it ended up being an audition for people. So of all of the 4 people that came and did it with us, 2 of them joined our team for last year, one being Julian, the other one being Wilfred. Julian has had to take a break for a year. He's doing some stuff with work and family, and he'll be back. He might be back part-time this year, but he'll definitely be back the year after. But Wilfred was a big one of those. And because we only had 4 spots, the 5th place was actually Mick wanted to actually be part of one of those classes. So unfortunately he couldn't, went and started his own team, really went at it. And then because he's a mate of ours, we asked him if he could help us out for Fat Drip because I wasn't going to be there. And then it was kind of natural from there. We kept talking, and one thing led to another, and it sort of felt like the right thing for everyone to do. And because we all get along, this one just sort of happened. The other two were sort of more planned.
So you went through a bit of a process then, sort of more based on working out who fit in best with the team dynamic.
Yeah, like we're not a team of individuals at all. No one professes to be amazing at everything. No one in our team could do what the whole team does on their own. And we know that. And that's one of the things that we learned early on is as soon as you can be humble and say, I'm not the best at everything, but you're good at this and I'm good at this, let's try and fill the gaps elsewhere that we're both not good at. And that's where Sash sort of came in early on too. Sash was one of our first team members, but he brought the organisation, which Sam and I are terrible at. And so between those three things and then processes, procedures, flavour profiles, we sort of built it from there. And then we felt like the final thing was just the culture of the team and making sure we only had people that we liked competing with and being around.
Absolutely fantastic. That's so cool. So cool. I'm really happy to hear that sort of really come together for you nicely like that.
Yeah, we honestly couldn't be happier. We've got a great bunch of guys, and I think we worked out the other day that over time we've either competed with or had competing on our team over 15 or 16 people, including, like we had Aussie Pit Boys compete with us at Port Macquarie. We've had Craig from Suck Knuckle Smokers compete with us. We've competed with other teams, like I competed with Full Metal Kettle last year, and between all of that, the learning on both sides is invaluable. You pick up tips, you give tips, you build friendships, and it's something that really helps project you on a quicker learning path.
That is one thing that I have always really loved about competitive barbecue as opposed to other sports. Like you don't see, say, professional jiu-jitsu, which is my other hobby. You don't see professional jiu-jitsu players going up to each other and saying, hey, come learn my tricks. Yeah. And then I'll go learn your tricks and then we'll compete against each other. It just doesn't happen.
And I'm sure it doesn't. I mean, and there are those who are a little bit more secretive or like to compete on their own or, think that they're holding the keys to the secrets of how to be the best barbecue in the world. But for other people, this is a weekend hobby. None of us are making a living out of this. We're all there to have fun. And if we can improve as a collective, that's, I think, what everyone wants out of this.
Now, that's a philosophy that you've taken beyond just your interactions with other teams. And you have actually mentioned this earlier in the interview, your classes. You actually, from my understanding, I haven't attended one, but it's a full competition class.
Yeah, it's we pride ourselves on no secrets. Tent walls are down, well, not down, but it's always open for anyone to come in and have a beer and watch what we do at a comp. But also when we run our class, and sometimes I'm a bit disappointed to hear that other people run classes and don't quite, they'll spruik whatever rub their sponsors selling or whatever it is. But we legitimately go out there and we give everything away. We give from go to woe. And if it's not what we're actually using, we say, well, this is what we're using today because we want to, but this is what we actually use in competition and this is exactly how we do it. And what that's actually meant is it's bred, the class we ran last year, bred some teams, not saying just because of us, they worked hard themselves, but 3 out of the top 5 teams at Turf Wars last year, which was a competition in Melbourne, 40, 50 odd teams, whatever it was, 3 out of the top 6 had, mates of ours or attended our class or whatever it might be. So, and they're rookie teams, they're guys who had never really competed before. That could have been their second comp. So that's real testament to them.
That is, man. That's a very good indicator. Have you got more lined up for 2020?
At this stage, there's a lot in the pipeline, but no dates locked in. So we hope to really, hope to get that sorted.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to hearing more about that very soon.
Yeah, hopefully within the next month or so, we'll announce some dates and get that happening.
Got a project you'd like to work on with the SHC team? Shoot Ben an email on ben@smokinghotconfessions.com and let's have a conversation.
Alrighty, now for the third segment of the interview. You've mentioned your pork ribs a couple of times, how they're your most consistent category. We've talked about your classes, how they're no holds barred. Mate, give us a run through. Keep in mind it's an audio format. Be as descriptive as you can with your language. Mate, tell us about your ribs.
Well, this is something that we probably posted on our Instagram a year and a half ago now. It's a method that we've been working on for a long time. So two things that are key to our rib process is our Fornetto bullet, so 22-inch Fornetto bullet. And the other thing is the meat that we get from our butcher, Luke at Kelly's Meats. I know they sound like shameless plugs, but the truth is we have not changed that combination since day one, and we truly believe that's what's gotten us to where we are. So first of all, consistency, whether you're using a drum or a bullet or an offset, just make sure that you're consistent with the product so you can tweak it to your own times and your own techniques. But what we actually do is we like to treat our ribs or cook them in a way that gets a sweet, smoky flavour. That's the profile we go for. So what we actually do is we start off by, we use St. Louis ribs. We go to our butcher and always try and get the first and foremost, look for the most marbling in the ribs. Crooked bones is second to marbling. You're rather a moist rib that's on an angle than a dry rib that's straight. So second to that, we look for straight ribs. And then we look for ones that are fairly even in thickness to each other. So try and get a group of 3 or 4 ribs. So we'll probably cook 3 to 4 St. Louis ribs per comp. And then what we do is we trim the excess fat off the top, and then we remove the membrane from the bottom. One good trick, which we pinched off a mate of ours, Sterling from Loon Booty. We saw a photo of him doing it, which was using scissors to round out the edges of your pork ribs to make sure that they look nice and neat. So trim the fat, round them out, and then remove the membrane. And then what we do is we actually hang our ribs in our Fornetto directly over the charcoal. So straight under the top, the first bone, we pop in some hanging hooks. And then what we do is we proceed to rub it. We actually are a bit old school in the sense that we use mustard as a binder on our ribs. Apparently in America, most guys don't do that anymore, but we seem to still do it. So with our rubs, so we'll use a base rub, probably something along the lines of a sweeter rub. So one of the ones that we'd love to use is Kirby and Spencer's chicken rub. We also mix in with that a little bit more salt. So we like to have a little bit of a savoury note, but not as much. And then one of the tips is we'll always add a tiny little bit of accent, which is MSG, effectively. So a little bit of that. So I'd like to give it that little bit of depth and pop that gives, and nothing else really can. So that'll be our main layer. Then what we'll do is we will hang the ribs in the smoker directly over the charcoal. So what we do is we take the fire basket out, not the fire basket, the water pan out, and we effectively cook it at around 275 to 300 directly over the charcoals for 50 minutes. And what we do is every 15 minutes, we give the lid a quarter turn. So we've got timers on our phones, and as soon as the timer goes off, everyone knows clockwise, quarter turn. So whoever's not busy at that time will do it. And what that does is it means if the charcoal down the bottom is burning uneven, so it's gone to one side or to another, all ribs are going to basically get an even coverage of heat as they go in that time.
So you're effectively turning your bullet smoker into a drum smoker.
That's right. And to our mind, there's not too much difference. You're sure they are different cookers, and we've cooked on both. And drums do cook slightly differently, but you can effectively get the exact same cook out of both. We don't see any need to go out and spend lots of money on a drum smoker when you can get, from your local Bunnings or online a bullet smoker for effectively a quarter of the price. That does just as good a job and works well at home too. So turning the lid directly over, what happens is we spritz it as well every so often. So we'll lift the lid closer towards the end of that 50-minute mark and start spritzing, and that actually starts dripping some of the juices off into the embers and the charcoal, which lets the smoke go up into the ribs. So that's how we get our smoky profile in our ribs.
So obviously by that stage then the rubber's set. It's not going to sort of wash off with the spritz.
Yeah, especially directly over the charcoal, you get to a point where that rub, it becomes a bark. It's not a traditional bark in the sense that you've had a nice airflow like a brisket over it for a long period of time. It's more like a caramelized sugar bark, which you get in drums as well. The meat sizzles a little bit, and that's why we can use just a sweet rub with a little bit of that savoury note, because we're going to get more savouriness out of the smoke flavour and caramel depth out of it, sort of setting on there.
Sounds so good.
I wouldn't change. I don't change it for home when I do ribs at home either. So basically, turn the lid every 15 minutes, and then as we're coming up to that 50-minute mark, that's when we start looking for colour. So we look, for us, we want to get our, I guess, the bark or the caramelisation of the sugar in the rub as close to caramel as we can before it starts to burn, and it's a very fine line. So what we'll do is we'll have our foil set up, ready to go to wrap. So we do double layered foil for a wrap. In there we put butter, brown sugar, honey, and a little bit of liquid. So you could use apple cider vinegar or apple juice, or, I mean, we've used anything. It was soda water. Sometimes we've forgotten to buy things, but, we've used, what do we have? Big Red once, we use that because we were drinking it. Beer, anything works. What you're just trying to do is make sure that you're adding enough liquid that the sugars in the rub and the sugar that you've put into the wrap doesn't burn. We made that mistake a few years ago at a comp, and we've never made it again. So lots of butter, lots of sugar, a little bit of liquid. I mean, if you're starting off and you're trying to get flavour profiles, use something like lemonade is what we suggest. But, we're not too fast. And the other thing is we spritz with water on all of our proteins. We don't have special fancy spritzers for anything, so we only ever use water these days.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, do you know what it is? We found it made it a little bit inconsistent in the sense that if you've got, say, even a pickle, like pickle brine, that's got some sort of sugar in it or whatever, so that can impart flavour when it caramelizes, and you can't really control the consistency between cooks. So it's adding different flavors that, we might not necessarily want on other proteins or on that protein at that time. So using water allows us just to moisten the meat.
Cool.
And the other thing, for some proteins we will use, something like a beer or whatever, but again, that's how we're feeling on the day, not necessarily a hard and fast rule. So what we do is, from there, we wrap them tight. And to describe how we wrap it in a way. First, we'll wrap the lengthways. So we'll wrap one lengthways side over. Then we'll fold that back on itself so that it's only just covering the rib. And then we'll fold the other side lengthways over, and again wrap that backwards over itself, so it's just covering once it's on the other edge of the rib. And what that means is when you open it, it's easy to check your ribs. So then when you get to the shorter ends, or the longer pieces of foil, we then just fold those directly over, and then it's literally just opening up that wrap quite easily to check as you go through the cook. So we do that for each for each rib, and then from there we'll actually put the water pan back in the Fornetto, and what that does is it creates a heat sink. We don't put any water in it. It's just the straight water pan with nothing in it, and then it creates a heat sink and also a bit of a deflector plate. And then we'll put all the ribs back in, and then what we actually do is we cook for about roughly another hour and 10 minutes. Is sort of what we found is a sweet spot for these particular ribs. Again, we're turning the lid every 15 minutes. We're also rotating the ribs. So if we've got 3 ribs, they fit perfectly on the top rack. We put the rack back on and we lay them, the ribs, meat side down. And then what we'll do is we'll rotate the ribs, the 3 racks of ribs. So move the one that's in the middle to the end, the one from the end back to the other side, and so on and so forth. Plus we'll turn the lid every 15 minutes. And that just means it cooks evenly. And then from there, after about an hour and 10 minutes, we start checking for tenderness. The 2 ways we check for tenderness is we'll effectively pick the rib up with some heat-proof gloves, and you can feel how bendy it is. But also another way is to get your either usually a wooden skewer is a better test than a digital probe, and put it between the bones until the resistance starts to be a little bit like butter, a bit less than butter, but not as tender as a brisket, but somewhere in between tough and there. So you can test for temp. It's probably around 200 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe a little bit more. Then from there, once we're happy, we rest our ribs if we have to, depending on the time, but we try and get as close to handing time as we can. And then we'll just put our ribs on a rack. We still do and have for a long time made a homemade sauce for our ribs. But when we don't, we use a combination of the Texas Wizard's Glaze and Loon Booty's, I think it's called Southwest barbecue sauce. I've got a big gallon tub back at Sasha's warehouse. Can't remember the exact name, but it's the...
I think you'll find that you had a big gallon tub of it back at...
Yeah, it's gone. We use it as well at home. So it's those 2 sauces mixed together, but we use it more as a glaze. And then basically we'll glaze. We put it in a Pyrex jug and we pour the glaze just over the meat side of the ribs. So we don't put any glaze on the bottom of our ribs at all. And then we'll put it back in the smoker for, say, 5 to 10 minutes just to tack the sauce on and warm them back up if they've been resting. And then what we do is we pour the remaining sauce on the chopping board. We flip our ribs upside down. So again, meat side onto the chopping board, which allows you to line your ribs up and cut them how you want. So sometimes we find you can cut bone side down and try and find the ribs, but you're probably going to miss them most times. So we put sauce on the board. We then cut our ribs, choose the ones we want by tenderness and juiciness. So if you pick up a rib and give it a bit of a squeeze, which we've got a video of us doing, the one with the most juice that's coming out and the one that's got the most sort of striations in the meat, that's the one that's probably going to be the most tender and delicious. You can't take a bite out of all of them because sometimes you've only got 6 ribs to choose from, so you can sort of tell by touch.
Yeah, judges aren't going to be real impressed if they open the box and there's a bite missing out of each one.
That's exactly right. And I've been known in, when we're a bit tired and sort of just doing our thing and it's the middle of handing times to bite the middle rib just because, I've lost concentration or something. So that's almost cost us a few times. But, you got to make sure you got at least 6 ribs in the box. We like to stack our ribs, which, we're no secret. All of our boxes get posted on Instagram. So that's the look we go for. But before we stack it, we'll choose our 6 or 10 or 12 or however many ribs we're going to put in the box. We'll put a coating of we'll put a bit more rub back on the ribs. Sorry, a bit more sauce back on the ribs because most of it's come off then from the board, but some of it's still on there, which allows you to add a fresh coat of sauce, which is quite delicious compared to one that's been sitting in the smoker and tacked on. So you get that sort of multi-layered leveling of flavours. Then we'll put a nice dusting of our finishing dust on top. We'll give it a final spritz with some water over the top, which helps sort of set that glaze and make it a bit more of sheen. And then we pack our parsley quite tight in the box and we use a spatula. So what we do is we slide a spatula underneath our ribs and then put them all in 6 at a time, 5 at a time, whatever it might be, all in one swift motion. And that's that's our technique.
Mate, that is so cool. Thank you so much for sharing all that. My brain's just rolling around now. There's at least 4 things there that I hadn't thought of before that I'm like, All right, next time I'm doing that for sure.
It was a bit of a long explanation, but that's the whole process from go to woe. It feels a lot longer on a Sunday morning, trust me, but it's you can go back and do it step by step if you like. That's what I tend to do when I forget how to tie a tie or a bow tie. I Google it and I just rewatch it 50 times in a row to learn how to do it.
Yeah, fair enough. I can't believe that I'd never thought of pouring some sauce over the board and then tipping the ribs face down to cut them.
Yeah, I don't know.
I can't believe I didn't think of that.
From. I don't know where we got that one from. It could have been that Pitmaster series that's on TV, or one of our mates could have told us, or could have happened by accident. I honestly can't remember, but that's something we've been doing for a while, and it just means that less sauce comes off your ribs when you're cutting them.
Yeah, gold, mate, gold. Absolutely fantastic. All right, well, let's start to wrap this up then. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for coming into the confessional. Thanks for being my guinea pig for trying out this new live recording method. Hope it hasn't been too painful for you. And before I let you go, why don't you tell all the listeners where they can track you down on the social medias?
So the two main forms of social media for us is Facebook and Instagram. Both handles are Butchers Axe BBQ, being BBQ. Find us on there. They both link to each other, and you'll find us loitering around on various Facebook pages, giving advice and just chatting. And if you've got any questions, feel free. We'd love to chat all things barbecue all the time. So, yeah. Absolutely fantastic.
All right, mate, I'm going to say it one more time. Thank you very much for coming on board the show, and best of luck with 2020.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.
Oh, I almost made it through the whole episode without double pressing something. Damn it. All right. Doesn't matter. Okay, so there you have it, family. That is Michael Trakovich from Butchers Axe BBQ. He's come in here. He's told us a breakdown of the 2019 championships. We found out about what he's got planned for 2020. We found out about the Hunter rub, the story behind that, the new rubs they got coming out, the new team members, the audition process that they go through when they're building a team, and then he walked us through his ribs step by step. So for me, that was amazing. So I'm really hoping that you got a lot out of that as well. And I'm going to say thank you to you as well for bearing with me. As I said, I'm learning how to use a new mixing desk. So the first couple of episodes of this season, they might be a little jarring. Hope it's not too bad. Stick with me because it's going to make things a whole lot smoother for me for 2020. And it also does open up the opportunities for possibly doing some live shows at competitions because I can hook it up to a PA system. That could be pretty cool. Some big news coming up for me. So I'm heading back over to the States again in April, taking the wife and son over again. This year I've been invited to present at the NBBQA conference. We're going over to Louisville, Kentucky. So that's going to be pretty daunting. I'm a king of procrastination and imposter syndrome. So I haven't really got my presentation nailed down yet. And I'm literally down to, I think, 11 weeks or something now. So I've really got to get onto that and do something with that. So that's the big news from me. We are heading over to Louisville, Kentucky. I'll be presenting at the NBBQA conference over there, which is going to be a hell of an experience. And then we're going on a bit of a 3-week road trip around through Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico. We're going to go check out the Rocky Mountains and see the aliens. So let's hope I make it back from that trip. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you for listening. Head on over to Facebook. Make sure you follow Butcher's Axe, follow Smoking Hot Confessions. I've got a great Facebook group over there. If you're not on there yet, come over, join us on that, Smoking Hot Confessions barbecue community. And if you do want to grab yourself some killer t-shirts, I'm actually going to be entering them in the NBBQA T-Shirt Design Awards this year. That'll be interesting. You can check them out over on the website as well, smokinghotconfessions.com/shop. All right, I think that's about all I needed to say. So I'm going to say thank you very much. Take care of each other and keep on queuing.
Thanks for listening to the Smoking Hot Confessions podcast. Head on over to smokinghotconfessions.com for recipes, tips, and Ben's own confessions.